right, let's talk about one of the most incredible stories you'll ever hear. It's about Sir Ernest Shackleton's 1914 Antarctic expedition. But here's the thing, this isn't a story about exploration or discovery. Nope, this is about what happens when everything goes completely, disastrously wrong, and a mission turns into one of the greatest survival stories of all time.
So, to really get what happened here, you've got to look at the plan versus the reality. The plan, it was ridiculously ambitious. They were going to be the first people ever to walk across the entire Antarctic continent. That was the dream. But the reality? Oh man. It turned into a 2-year battle for their lives, just trying to survive against the ice. The original goal, it just vanished. All that mattered was staying alive. Okay, so let's set the scene. It's late 1914. I want you to really think about this. There's no GPS, no Gore-Tex, no satellite phones, nothing. And Shackleton and his crew of 28 guys are setting out to conquer the last true frontier on the planet. We're talking a nearly 3,000-kilometer trek across solid ice, with temperatures that would plummet way, way below freezing. I mean, for that era, this was basically like planning a mission to Mars. It was that audacious.
So they get to their last stop before heading into the real danger zone, a place called South Georgia Island. And the local whalers, guys who'd spent their entire lives in these waters, they come up to Shackleton and they basically say, don't do it. They told him the ice in the Weddell Sea was the worst they'd ever seen. They begged him to wait, to turn back. But Shackleton, he had this mission in his head. He was determined. So he ignored them and sailed on.
And, that decision to ignore the experts, it had consequences, fast. The Endurance sailed right into the exact trap they'd been warned about. And just like that, the grand dream of crossing a continent, it was over. The mission completely changed. It wasn't about exploration anymore. It was about just trying to stay alive.
And this wasn't some quick disaster. It was this slow, grinding nightmare. The ship, the Endurance, gets stuck in the ice in January. And for the next 9 months, they're just stuck, drifting with the ice as the Antarctic winter closes in around them. Can you imagine? Day after day, just listening to the groaning and cracking as this massive wall of ice literally crushes their ship like a walnut. And then, finally, in November, she sinks. Their only way home is gone.
So there they are, standing on this sheet of ice, watching their home, their shelter, their only link to civilization, just disappear beneath the waves. The gravity of that moment must have been crushing. This one quote from a crewman, Tom McClure, just says it all. I don't think we'll ever get back home now. I mean, that's it, right? Total despair. They were completely and utterly alone at the bottom of the world.
And now, with the ship gone, what do you even do? They're literally castaways, not on an island, but on a big, floating, unstable chunk of ice, in the middle of maybe the most remote sea on Earth. No radio, no way to send an SOS. Nobody in the entire world even knew they were in trouble, let alone where they were. So their daily life became this brutal routine of survival. Food was cut way back. We're talking like 1 biscuit a day. They had to hunt seals and penguins to eat. But here's where Shackleton's genius really shines. He knew that morale would kill them just as fast as the cold. So he kept everyone on a strict schedule with duties and routines. It was all about keeping their minds occupied because he understood that their mental game was every bit as important as the physical one. Just think about this number for a second. 497. That's how many days these guys survived from the time the ship got trapped until they finally set foot on solid ground again. 497 days. That's almost a year and a half adrift on ice in the harshest place on the planet. It's just mind-boggling. So after all that time, they do it. They finally reach land. It's this godforsaken place called Elephant Island. And yeah, it's solid ground, which is great, but it's also a trap. It's totally uninhabited, and it's way off any shipping lanes. No one is coming for them. Rescue is not an option. So Shackleton realizes if they're going to be saved, he has to do it himself. And that's when he comes up with this final, insane, desperate plan. Okay, so look at the choices he had. They were all terrible. The closest places, Cape Horn and the Falklands, would mean sailing through the Drake Passage, which is known as the roughest, most violent sea on the entire planet. A total meat grinder. So what does he do? He picks the longest route, a crazy 1,300 kilometers to South Georgia, because he gambled that the winds and currents there would give them their one tiny shot at making it. So Shackleton and 5 of his toughest guys climb into this tiny 22-foot lifeboat, basically a glorified rowboat, and set off into the Southern Ocean. And they leave the other 22 men behind on that desolate island. I mean, the trust there is just incredible. The men left behind had no idea if Shackleton would even survive, let alone if he could ever come back for them. It was a complete leap of faith.
And against all odds, they make it. After 17 days in that tiny boat, getting battered by hurricane-level winds and giant waves, they actually land on South Georgia. It's a miracle. But the story's not over, not even close. In what has to be one of history's cruelest jokes, they made it to the right island, but the wrong side. And between them and help was a massive, unmapped, impassable mountain range.
Yeah, the storm blew them way off course. They're on the wrong side of the island. The whaling station, civilization, rescue, it's all on the other side. Their little boat is completely wrecked, so sailing around is out of the question. That left them with only one option, and it was an option that no human being had ever attempted before. They had to go over the top. They had to cross the mountains. And so they did. For 36 straight hours, with no sleep, Shackleton and 2 of his men just walked. Their gear was pathetic. They had some rope, and they literally screwed nails through the bottom of their boots to get some grip on the ice. After 36 hours of that, they finally stumbled into the whaling station on the other side. The whalers who saw them said they looked like wild men, like ghosts who had come back from the dead.
But even reaching safety wasn't the end. Shackleton's first thought was, I have to get my men. He didn't rest. He immediately started organizing a rescue, but winter had fully set in, and the sea ice was a solid barrier. He tried to get back to Elephant Island once, failed. He tried a second time, blocked by ice. A third time, no way through. For 3 solid months, he was just hitting a wall of ice, while his men were still stranded.
But the man just would not quit. He finally convinced the Chilean government to lend him this little steel-hulled steam tug, the Yelcho. And on his 4th try, more than 4 months after he'd sailed away in that tiny lifeboat, he found a way through. He finally broke through the ice and steamed towards Elephant Island with absolutely no idea if anyone would still be alive. So let's be clear, by its original goal, the expedition was a complete and total failure. They wanted to cross Antarctica, they never even really started the trek. But in failing, they achieved something so much greater. The story that came out of that failure, it's become the stuff of legend. A masterclass in leadership and what people are capable of when everything falls apart. So you have 28 men. They set out in 1914 to do something no one had ever done. Instead, they sailed into a frozen nightmare, lost everything, and were stranded at the bottom of the world for nearly 2 years. And after all of that, after the ship was crushed, after surviving on the ice, after the starvation and the freezing cold and that insane boat journey, how many of them made it back? 28. Every single one. He got them all home. And that right there is why we still tell this story. It's become the ultimate lesson in leadership. Because true leadership isn't about ticking a box or hitting a target. It's about what you do when the plan goes out the window. And the new mission becomes something much more fundamental, keeping your team together and getting them home safely no matter what. And you know what's wild? The story just got this amazing final chapter recently. In 2022, over 100 years after she went down, they found her. They found the wreck of the Endurance. And because of the freezing cold water, she was almost perfectly preserved, sitting there on the bottom of the sea, a perfect silent monument to this whole incredible saga.
Which kind of leaves you with this one big question, right? Shackleton failed his mission. He didn't cross Antarctica. But he also achieved something that seems almost superhuman. So it makes you think, what's the real measure of success? Is it about achieving the goal you wrote down at the start? Or is it about how you handle the absolute catastrophe that you never ever could have planned for?